welcome, welcome, welcome to our community Church Unitarian Universalist. I am your minister, Reverend Darcy Roque, and this is August Roque Van Young, and we are delighted to be with you here today, virtually. So who are we as community church? We are a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. And so today, before our service, hopefully you saw some of our many announcements. If you are interested in also receiving our weekly newsletter, which has a link to our services, please check in with our wonderful virtual greeter, Marilyn Malone, who has a link to sign up so you can check in and also send us any announcements that you think are important for the community. We have everything from chalice circles, how to support each other in pastoral care, and our social justice work. In particular, I'd like to lift up our membership class today. It is at 1 p.m. It is virtual. If you are still interested in joining us, you can email membership@ccuunola.org, and we will be able to send you the link before our 1 p.m. time. And with that, we are delighted that you are here, and let us begin our worship in earnest.
We light this flame to affirm the light of truth and knowledge, the warmth of love and community, and the fire of hope and commitment.
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see you today. I'm going to share a story with you about somewhere close to us. Just a short drive from New Orleans, Louisiana, are many acres of swampland deep in the Honey Island swamp that are said to be as uncorrupted, primitive, and untouched by man as anywhere in America. It is for this reason that some say it may actually be possible for a creature to live in these parts and go unnoticed by humans. Well, almost unnoticed. Legends abound in the swamp. There are legends about pirates such as Jean Lafitte, Pierre Rameau, and many more who supposedly hid buried treasures in these swamps. There are legends about ghosts of Native American Indians that still roam these swamps at night, and about mysterious green lights flickering at night deep in the swamps and lead travelers into the wilderness where they will never return. But nothing has seemed to have captured the attention of man like that of the legend of the Honey Island swamp monster. The first documented sighting of the creature took place in early August in 1963. Harlan Ford, a retired air traffic controller, and his friend Billy Mills came home from the swamp with an incredible story. The pair of veteran hunters claimed that while they were out in the swamps, they came across a large creature standing over the body of a boar. The strange creature had apparently ripped the boar's throat completely out. Harlan described the creature as being covered in dingy gray hair with longer hair hanging from its head. The two estimated the creature weighed close to 400 pounds and stood about 7 feet tall. The creature's enormous size and hair was frightening enough, but the amber-colored eyes and the horrible stench that reeked from the creature were the two things that stuck in Harlan and Billy's mind from the unbelievable encounter. While news of the story spread like wildfires, the locals knew that stories of this ferocious creature go back hundreds of years. The Native Americans of this area called the creature Letiche and describe it as an meat-eating, human-like creature that lived in the water and on the land. The Indians from this area believed that the swamp monster was once an abandoned child who was raised by alligators in the deep, dark regions of the swamp. Cajuns called the creature the Loup-Garou, which some say means werewolf. Some researchers believe that the Honey Island swamp monster is related to Bigfoot. While the body size and description is very similar, the tracks found in and around Honey Island swamp do not resemble tracks collected in the Pacific Northwest. They are 4 and sometimes 3-toed, much like tracks discovered in southeast Texas and parts of Florida. Casts made by Harlan Ford are about 10 to 12 inches long and have 3 long, thin toes set next to each other and a 4th set back on the inside like a thumb. We do not claim to have seen the swamp monster, even though this wonderful place is our home, but we do have enough sense to know that there are all kinds of things out in the swamps. There are mysteries of buried gold and Indian maidens that died too young. There are some who have seen magical-looking green lights glimmering in the swamps at night and whispers in the evening winds. Who is to say what else is hidden here? We just think y'all might want to come take a look for yourselves. Thank you.
Our first reading today is from Wendell Berry. It's an excerpt. There are, it seems, 2 muses. The muse of inspiration, who gives us inarticulate visions and desires, and the muse of realization, who returns again and again to say, "It is yet more difficult than you thought." This is the muse of form. It may be then that form serves us best when it works as an obstruction to baffle us and deflect our intended course. It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we have begun our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. We now move into our time of joys and sorrows. So we ask that in this virtual community, we take the time to care for each other and hold each other in the joys that are arising, as well as in the sorrows that we hold each day. So as we listen to We Shall Overcome, you will have the opportunity to write your joys and your sorrows in the Zoom chat box, which we read aloud after our musical moment.
Hi, this is Mark and Megan. We are honored to be here. We'd like to thank everyone at CCUU for having us. We're going to play a song for you that I'm sure needs no introduction. Here we go.
Thank you all for your joys and your sorrows. I will now read them aloud at this time. A joy from Jada. My birthday was yesterday. Happy birthday, Jada. A sorrow is that mental and physical health issues have me depressed. We send our love to you, and please know that we are here. Alan Malone is looking forward to getting the cataract removed from his right eye this coming Wednesday. The one in my left eye will follow 4 weeks later. This is a joy. Howard Milky writes that his late brother Paul's grandson John and his wife Han had a healthy baby boy named Paul. The family is excited about the arrival of Paul in the family. They live in Seattle, and Beverly and my grandchildren are planning on visiting this week to meet and greet Paul. Congratulations to you, Howard, and welcome to this world, Paul. Regina S. writes, they are glad the cold weather is gone. Yes, it is a beautiful, glorious few days, has it not been? And following up on that, Sean Lote writes that joy that spring is almost officially here. Absolutely. Marilyn writes that it is wonderful to be working in the garden again after the cold weather kept me inside for so long. John Davenport writes that you can probably get a snowball at Haydell's today. Well, there you go. Angela writes that her nephew got engaged and will be married this year, and my cousin is expecting their second child. So good to feel life is moving forward in this pandemic with hope for the future. A beautiful way to put that. Thank you. We light a candle for that hope. Liz Trotter writes that she's sending much gratitude for all of the love and support I have received from all of you in so many ways. The doctor was quite pleased with the results of my surgery, and I move forward with hope. We are so grateful for that. We light a candle for your continued healing, Liz. I myself want to light a candle of joy to see this amazing team who has helped us stay connected in worship through all of these months. Looking at our wonderful president, CCU President Amy Earhart Lovelace, and our amazing tech folks, Amelia Earhart Lovelace, Bill Fernandez, and Sally Jackson, who are here, as well as Eric. And I am also very delighted to see a new member, Kat Vieira, who is going to be joining us and also maybe joining our tech team. No pressure, but it's lovely to see her here today too. So here is for our ongoing work as a community. Thank you so very much. And so with that, we light 2 more candles for all the joys that are only just now bubbling up, that we have yet words to articulate. Please know that we share these joys and we are here to celebrate with you, even virtually, especially virtually, right? And also for all the sorrows that continue on, even as the weather becomes more spring-like, there is also a sadness and heaviness that many of us carry. Please know that we are a space for you to share that sorrow as well, and that we love you and that we care for you. Amen.
Good morning. It's now time for our offering. Community Church Unitarian Universalist is a self-sustaining congregation. Members and friends' generosity help us do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. You can give online at www.ccuunola.org/stewardship, or you can text at 504-370-2659. You can also send a check to 6690 Fleur de Lis Drive. That's in New Orleans, Louisiana, 70124. All of this is in the chat box. And if you have any trouble finding any of that, just reach out to us, membership at ccuu.org or board at ccu.org, and we'd be happy to help.
Ooh. planets, drive a mile through solid granite, thrive in all extremes of weather, but we cannot live together. We have pondered our existence, tracked the comets in the distance, but we're overcome with blindness by an act of human kindness. We have ventured where none have gone before us, but in matters fundamental, we are patterned on an old design. Welcome back, Tyrannosaurus. Evolution is a state of mind. We have filled the halls of science with the bones of mighty giants. They've been there for generations, buried under our foundations. It's a page right out of history. Everything is still a mystery, all except for one distinction. We can't stop our own extinction. We have set ourselves apart from all who've gone before us, but in matters fundamental, we are victims of an old design. Here's your chance, Tyrannosaurus. Maybe we can get it right this time. Ourselves apart from all that's gone before us, but in matters fundamental, we are victims of our own design. But here's your chance, Tyrannosaurus. Maybe we can get it right this time. And lead the chorus. Evolution is a state of
Our next reading is Psalm at High Tide by Martha Serpis. Rain on the river's vinyl surface, water that glitters, water that hardly moves, its branches witness to trees, to fronds, leaves, crab floats, piling, shopping carts, appliances. The divine earth takes everything in its wounded side and gives back wholeness. It bears the huddled profane and endures the soaking venerated in its wild swirls, this river fixed with wooden wares, radiant in misshapen glory. So over the last few years, I underwent a transformation, unrecognizable to the human eye. I became a swamp monster. Angry at the rhetoric and policies of the previous administration, my skin turned a sallow green. Infuriated by the unchecked rise of white supremacists, my nails grew webbing. Revelations of abuse of women by powerful men, memories of my own harassment increased my rage. I turned slimy as I moved from earth to water. I stretched to immense proportions. Glorious and terrifying, my swamp monster saw injustice and called it out. My rage propelled me to slither toward the next fight. But soon, my rage felt all-consuming. I could never do enough, never be enough, because everything, when I really looked at it, made me angry. And I turned that anger, ironically, that need to fight and fix, all on myself. But here I stand today, without the monster webbing, but living happily with my monster. So to be clear, I didn't actually turn into a swamp monster, but the metaphor helps me better understand a part of myself, a rage previously unknown to me, because each of us has something, a swamp monster, or perhaps a rougarou, a Cajun werewolf, creeping in our lives that we want to slay, to get rid of. Whether it's a need to control or an anxiety that brings you to your knees. But I want to journey with you today, not to slay a monster, but to find some peace with it in our lives and through our Unitarian Universalist faith in this big, swampy world. Because our monsters may end up being our most constant guides through the treacherous, unknown waters of life. Now, all this monster talk is to say this. Until we learn to love, or at least live side by side with the parts of ourselves that we want to erase or self-help away, we can't ever truly be whole. And that wholeness, that acceptance of our whole selves, as battered and broken as we may be, is what it takes to live into this faith tradition. Because only when we see ourselves as whole can we see the world as whole and each other in our fullness. And only at that point can we begin to enact our Unitarian Universalist vision of a world community of peace, liberty, and justice for all. Both sides of our Unitarian Universalist roots speak to this wholeness. The Unitarians from the very beginning saw God as one, divine, whole, Unitarian. And as for Universalists, their afterlife restorationism, that all people will eventually be reconciled to God, that no one, even the cruelest demagogue, will be damned, takes immense compassion. It also takes a hard recognition of self, that even the best of us, the sainted Unitarians, for example, generally our scientists or activists, were human and flawed. All of us still will be restored. Now, some of us may have to wait in an OMV line for a long while, but we're all going to get there, however one sees there. Heaven, nature, energy. Because only with all beings, all parts of ourselves and this world, can we reach divine wholeness. A minister mentor of mine once remarked that the time she felt most compassionate toward others was after she messed up. Suddenly, all those things that frustrated her about others, mean comments or missed deadlines, began to look a lot more like human mistakes rather than personal affronts. because she made mistakes too, forgetting a meeting or lashing out at an inopportune time. And in seeing herself with a little more wholeness, a wonderful minister who is human and flawed, she was able to glimpse the lives of congregants and people around her with a little more wholeness too. The external swamp monsters in her life looked a little less horrifying because she recognized herself in them. Her swamp monster could also be known as grace for herself and for others. In our reading today, Psalm at High Tide, Louisiana poet Martha Serpis imagines a watery place by the shore, possibly the swamp we are currently navigating, filled with the expected, fronds and leaves, and the unexpected, shopping carts and appliances. It's not a beautiful image that she describes. And yet, this mixture of the sacred water and profane litter is also a reality, and as such is worthy of a poem. And given this profane reality, what does the earth do? The divine earth takes everything in its wounded side and gives back wholeness. If that's not restorationist universalism, I don't know what is. And now, lest you think this is a sermon about self-sacrifice, diminishing all your needs in service of others' brokenness, that is not this sermon. No. What I'm saying is that you have cracks and fractures that the world and you have wrought, and you are whole. Like the river in Martha Serpis's poem, you are radiant in misshapen glory. Because the earth has taken you in its wounded side. Not because the earth is a self-sacrificing martyr. No, because the earth is whole and knows what it needs to remain whole, to bring all of us to itself. We humans need to learn this lesson too. The Unitarian Universalist principle calls us to respect the interdependent web of which we are all a part. And those who do not respect this interconnected web, whether they like it or not, are still a part of it. Now, in this understanding, we do not succumb or cater to authoritarianism or racism, for example. Instead, we recognize something that authoritarians may never comprehend. We are all inextricably linked. And what we do with that recognition is important. If I let my swamp monster lash out in anger, for example, then eventually I must recognize and account for my actions. That doesn't mean I was all wrong and someone else was all right. But it does mean making the amends I must make, sewing back that interconnectedness if possible. And if we are able to do that in our own lives, then it becomes easier and essential to ask for accountability from others, not in defensiveness, but in a real desire for relationship, moving forward, hand in swamp monster hand. Now, this may be easier for those of us in the same community, sharing similar values. Here's a hard one. What of those individuals whose words and actions we abhor? The truly terrifying Cthulhu of the deep, so frightening that we want to turn them into mythical villains rather than recognizing their real and present danger. So Brad Galloway was indoctrinated into a Canadian neo-Nazi group at age 19. For 13 years, he not only spouted white supremacist ideology, he recruited others to his virulent cause. His disavowal of neo-Nazism came over time. As he noted to NPR's On the Media, he was exhausted by trying to think like that, to hate as he encountered more and more cultures which challenged his supremacist ideology. Brad is now a case manager with Life After Hate, a program run by former white supremacists who work to get far-right extremists to leave hate groups and accept responsibility for their actions. As Brad noted, as his time as a neo-Nazi, far-right recruiters look for vulnerability and shame as targets for recruitment. Instead of coming to terms with one's own inner Cthulhu, or even the monster of inequity and injustice in this larger world, white supremacists choose to externalize it, baselessly making monsters of people of color, women, Jewish, and Muslim people. To move out of this poisonous white supremacist thinking, Galloway has devoted his life to supporting others in recognizing the shame they carry, both before and after they leave neo-Nazism, accepting responsibility for their actions and atoning for their vitriol. And just because you ask for forgiveness doesn't mean it's granted or deserved. But the first step for you is stepping back into and owning all parts of yourself, including your monsters. Seeing yourself as whole and human, flawed and connected, a part of everyone else's story. Now, this was a provocative example, but how we all choose to move forward amidst our universalist theology, including consistently calling ourselves and others to account, is our religious call and our challenge. A constant reminder that we're also linked to those parts of ourselves we might not like. A part that I don't particularly like about myself, a lifelong but not fatal case of perfectionitis. I've spoken before about my perfectionitis. The gorgeous spreadsheets coinciding with a lack of sleep. The self-care meditations collapsing into regret for my lack of mindfulness. The need to say something just right, getting in the way of saying anything at all. Now, don't get me wrong. My perfectionism has gotten me through great schooling and accomplishments to seeing y'all at this pulpit. But letting this perfectionism be my swamp tour guide is a bad idea. My perfectionism is, like so many of us who are multifaceted, a different beast than my rage swamp monster. My perfectionist told me that every out of place branch in the swamp must be fixed. Alligators and bugs and all that bites should be relocated. Perhaps we could make some potable water out of this mud. This perfectionist was trying to fix the swamp, making it something that it isn't, because she had yet to see her own radiant, misshapen glory as a beautiful and unique thing. But then my perfectionist became swamped, pun intended, sorry, I had to do that once, by my rage monster. When an ectopic pregnancy and its attendant hospital complications led to trauma, depression, and near death, I was so angry. At the hospital for not believing my physical pain, the insurance company for its repeated attempts to label my surgery elective, at my isolation because we don't talk about these things enough. My perfectionist wanted to fix it all immediately. Find gratitude in what I already had. Go to a few therapy sessions, be done with it. My swamp monster wanted to roar. Eventually, I made friends, or at least acquaintances, with both. I gave myself grace, processing my pain in therapy and writing, holding on to some of my anger to fuel my continuing advocacy for reproductive rights, health, and justice. And sometimes I'm just not okay. How about you? Are you okay? Are you okay with not always being okay? As we try to reckon with anxiety, sadness, and anger in this fraught time, do some of us Unitarian Universalists, in our lofty goal of a lifelong spiritual journey, end up trying to fix our spirits and emotions a little too quickly? For example, have any of you tried to fix yourself during this pandemic? I know I have, with meditation or an exercise routine or that perfect diet. Noble aspirations. And might we also listen to not being okay sometimes? And in this listening, recognizing what is our personal monster to slay and what's not. The federal response to the pandemic crisis has not only shown the ineptitude of a previous administration, but also, honestly, the hollowness of our American system of governance, with its ever-growing lack of access to health care, education, and basic human needs. No amount of yoga can fix that. And so perhaps we can channel some of that rage, frustration, boredom into changing systems as well, allying with those who have been hit hardest in this time to make real policy change, rather than just temporary relief. And our swamp monsters, who can keep our rage and inaction at the forefront, may be our very best guides in doing this kind of sacred work. My angry swamp monster, I know that she wants me engaged and fulfilled, a bringer of fierce justice. And that burning rage all the time would have burned me out fast. And so I let her express her anger by channeling that passion into activism, writing, dancing like a maniac to bad 80s music. And when I talk to my perfectionist, she wants what's best for me, even if we don't always agree what best for me looks like. So when I find myself comparing social media posts, or wildly cleaning my house, or doing just one last thing on the computer while my family looks on, I ask her to sit down, put her feet up. She's had a long day. My perfectionist appreciates it. Now, you may not have perfectionitis, and your swamp monster might be of a different variety, born of trauma or fear or insecurity. But each of you has some sort of monster that you push down inside of yourself, whether it's a rambunctious rougarou, a nosy nutria, or a slithery snake. Think for a moment of that part of yourself you sometimes wish to fix. What does it look like? Can you give it a name? Now, it is with that named monster, that named shame, this is where our theology starts, in our own lives and then in the larger world. This is much longer work, but can you consider, if not making friends, at least finding ways that you and your monster both want to be whole? My perfectionist helps me hone my writing and thinking in creative and fulfilling ways. And my swamp monster gives me courage when I most need it. I even embraced her for a Mardi Gras costume a couple of years ago. So if you're not ready to hug, at least step toward your scary monster. Ask it what it wants, and consider what you want from it. The answers may surprise you. Making friends with all these parts of yourself means life gets more complicated, because the more you let in the fullness of yourself, the more you let in the ambiguities of the world too. But it is in these moments of challenge, in the swamp that we cannot control, where we find our wholeness. As you use with an understanding of deeds, not creeds, of being an action-oriented faith, we often act in an imperfect world where we aren't necessarily the experts. Heck, I would say we're not always the experts of our own lives. But as Wendell Berry writes of inspiration, but which can extend to so much more in our lives, the mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. In all things, let your impeded stream sing. Take your swamp monster out dancing. Take your perfectionist to a slothful Netflix movie marathon. Make yourself your friend, not your foe. And then do the same for your city and for this country. In so doing, you will live out your Unitarian Universalist faith and your life with integrity and beauty. You, this world, and all that is in it are radiant and whole in your misshapen glory. Amen. Our benediction today comes from Toni Morrison's Beloved. Beyond anything I've said, it is this one sentence that I hope you carry with you as you move out into this world. You are your best thing. You are your best thing. We love you. Thank you for being with us. And for those who are able, please move into our coffee hour beginning in just a few moments. Amen.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall